Welcome to UO Today. I'm Barbara Altman, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. Our guest today is Hank Shaw, wild foods expert and author of Hunt, Gather, Cook, Finding the Forgotten Feast, published in 2011 by Rodale Press. Shaw's occupations have ranged from commercial fisherman to line cook to political reporter for newspapers throughout the U.S. He now writes about food, fishing, foraging, and hunting. His work has been published in Food and Wine, Organic Gardening, Field and Stream, and Gastronomica, among others. Shaw spends his days writing about food, fishing, foraging, and hunting, and cooking what he finds. Shaw presented a talk titled Hunter, Gatherer, Conservationist, The Challenge and Promise of Wild Food. That was on November 14th, 2011, as a guest of the UO's Clark Honors College. That event was co-sponsored by the Oregon Humanities Center. Hank, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
We're so glad to have you here. I wish we had a meal in front of us.
We'll do that later.
Okay, you're on. Hank, you are no stranger to these interviews. You've been on a book tour for quite a while now. Did you say 7 months?
It's pushing 7 months. We started in May.
Okay, and I believe you said you've had 30 dinners as part of that. Yes, 30 dinner events?
30 dinner events. I think I've been to 40 different states. I put 27,000 miles on my little white pickup truck. And I've been in snowstorms and stuck in swamps. I've been, it's like Johnny Cash. I've been everywhere.
Well, we're honored and pleased that you could fit us in on the very last date. So you have a great history of coming to hunting, gathering, foraging. You credit your mother for teaching you to fish. Can you talk about your family background a little bit?
Absolutely. My mom is your classic New England Yankee. I mean, she was born on the North Shore in Ipswich, and I mean, she was taught to fish hand lining perch off the rocks in Massachusetts. And a hand line's not even a hook and line. I mean, it's just a spool of string and a hook and bait on the end of it, and you have to, if you get a fish, you have to hand over hand and bring it up. I mean, she was pretty hardcore, and her uncle was a big forager in the area, so the family grew up with a very close connection to the land, and it was important for all of us to know what the plants and animals were in where we lived, and that is one of those sort of basic pieces of information that when you grow up with as part of who you are, you don't fully realize that everybody else doesn't necessarily have it. So when you walk down the street, do you know that that's a walnut? Do you know that that's a pistache? Do you know that those are dandelions? Do you know that that's a barberry, and so on and so forth? And when I walk through my neighborhoods, wherever I live, it's like I have that knowledge, and it seems to ground me a little bit better. And one of the things that I've been trying to do is help people, get a little bit more in the world. Most people live on it. And so this has kind of been a thing that I've been doing personally with friends for my whole life. And then I moved to Minnesota in 2002, and I wasn't a hunter at that point. But then one of my best friends, kind of nudged me into it, and I was hooked. And it was it was exciting, and it just to use just a colloquialism, it was just heavy. At the same time, I mean, hunting's a big deal, and it's never easy. But at the same time, it's kind of addictive. And the self-sufficiency angle of it has been something that have always grounded me, no matter what I've been doing in my professional life.
I think I heard you say in another interview that Minnesota is like the perfect place to hunt, forage, gather. But you've lived all over the states, right?
I have. Well, I mean, in many places. I mean, I think I've lived in Minnesota, in Wisconsin, in New York, in New Jersey, spent time in D.C., in Virginia, and now I live in California. So I've got a lot of the regions where I've actually lived, and then I've spent a lot of time in other regions, the desert and the south and such like that.
While you were here, I know that you helped put together a dinner, one of those 30 dinner events at Marche Restaurant here in town, and part of that was a foraging trip, right? What did you look for? What did you bring back?
Well, we were sort of specifically looking for edible mushrooms because this is the time of year for that, and I mean, it's Oregon. I mean, I did a little breakfast this morning at the Honors College, and so I asked, okay, so how many of you hunt? One guy raises his hand. How many of you fish? Maybe 4 or 5 people raise their hand. How many like mushrooms? And they all raised their hand, and it was like, okay, it's Oregon. I mean, how can you not go mushrooming? So we went out to the coast, and we found maybe 6 or 7 different kinds of edibles. Chanterelles were probably the most famous of what we found. But there's also a lot of remnants of other edible plants. I mean, this is November, so you're kind of past berry season, but we still found huckleberries. We found lots of salal and an Oregon grape. The berries are gone, but the bushes are there, so you can come back to them. We found wild fennel. We found walnuts. We found some barberries, oddly enough, which is not a native plant, but it sort of crept into the edges. Oregon is kind of a temperate rainforest, so there's a lot of different species, and there's a lot of different edibles up here.
Now, you say that one of your reasons for doing this is really to get people into the land, not just on it, right? But what are the other aspects of this? What is the conservationist aspect that you mentioned in your title?
One of the things that it's sort of counterintuitive if you're not in the hunting community or the fishing community is how much money, time, and effort that the hook and bullet crowd spends on conservation. For example, I'm a member of the California Waterfowl Association, and so we spend time cleaning up marshes. We spend time putting wood duck boxes in there so that we have more wood ducks. And I buy many extra duck stamps now, so that in order to hunt waterfowl in this country, you need 2 stamps. You need your state stamp and a federal stamp, and 80% to 85% of that money goes directly to habitat and conservation. There's a tax on every piece of ammo I buy that goes directly to conservation. And then beyond that, they do fundraising dinners, and there's auctions and raffles and all kinds of things like that. And I probably personally spend about $2,000 to $3,000 a year just on habitat. And so we spend a lot of time with this because we want our marshes, for example, I'm a big duck hunter, so we want our marshes to be clean, sustained, and we want more of them because we want more ducks. And I explained this to somebody who thought that this was kind of an odd deal considering we are hunters, right? Well, we get to hunt those marshes maybe 30 days a year, tops. But it's a marsh all year round, and it's a marsh not just for the ducks that we're looking for. It's a marsh for all water birds, all the native plants and everything. So we've created a habitat for an entire ecosystem, and the bargain is that we get to hunt it a few days a year, and I think that's a fair bargain. Likewise with fishing, Trout Unlimited does a lot of the same thing, and the fish and game laws are very, very stringent in this country, and rightly so, because up until about a century ago, there was so much market hunting, and one of the things that I hear from chefs and cooks is like, well, why can't I buy this stuff? It's like, well, you can't buy it because we almost drove everything to extinction by unregulated hunting a century ago, and that's not something anybody wants to return to. And I mean, that's kind of why when you hear about it, like a sportsman or it's sport hunting. Sport is kind of a term of art to differentiate it from market hunting. And so if you're not aware of that particular distinction, you think it's sport, like, oh, I just leave the animal on the ground. And that's not it at all. I know one hunter who doesn't eat what he kills, and he gives them the meat away.
So market hunting, just to make sure I understand the term, is hunting for something that you're going to use for food? No,
market hunting is commercial hunting.
Oh, it's commercial hunting.
Right.
Okay.
So it's like commercial fishing, but except it's hunting. And that's been banned for a century.
Oh, I misunderstood. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay. Do you think you can generalize, though? Is it safe to say that as a pastime, hunting is by its nature now a conservationist act?
I think that's a fair assumption because there's so much, we're the ones who are on the land. And we're the ones who are using the land. I mean, there's 2 kinds of schools of thought in terms of conservation. There's the nature as museum, and then there's nature as our home. And foragers and anglers and hunters, we take the view that nature is our home. This is where we're from, and this is where we will ultimately end up. And there's a whole second set of conservationists, and they're legitimate conservationists, but they tend to be more urban, and they tend to view nature as the other, and nature as a museum as something not to be touched. And that's sort of a fundamental division within the conservation community. And some groups, like the Nature Conservancy, are all about, interacting with nature, and then there are some that want to set off places where people don't go. And, that's one of the tensions in the nature of the business.
You seem to feel pretty in a pretty thorough way that we humans are part of nature and need to be in there. Quoting from the introduction to your book, you say, "I'm not content to merely be a spectator in nature. I feel compelled to play the part humans were born to play." So you're trying to get us back to what you see as a human, an innate human activity?
Absolutely. I mean, I think here's sort of the big picture message that I'm trying to do with this book and the blog, is we spend so much time in front of a computer screen or on our cell phones doing the BlackBerry prayer, or when we drive to work in metal boxes and everything is steel and concrete and inorganic and cold, that more than ever we need to have some connection in nature where we are actually rooted in the origins of who we were. And I'm not asking people to become some kind of crazy survivalist with a tinfoil helmet or anything like that. I mean, what I'm asking and hoping that people will do will be to take one piece of the natural world and make it theirs and own it. Whether it's mushroom hunting, whether it's picking berries with your kids. Maybe it's you go albacore fishing at a reed port every year. Maybe you go elk hunting to get your elk for the freezer, so that's your meat for the, it's. I haven't bought meat since 2005 because I hunt and fish for everything that I get. And if I didn't get a deer this year, so no venison for me. So, and I'm not going to go out and buy beef just because I didn't get a deer. You adapt and you overcome. But I have that connection, and you feel more closely connected to the land if you have a purpose when you go out into it. Case in point. Many years ago, when I was just starting out as a reporter, I wasn't making any money. So I was a good fisherman. So I managed to forage for seaside edibles, clamming, crabbing, fishing. For nothing, everything I ate for an entire, more or less a year, like March to Christmas, was the seafood that I had managed to collect myself. And when you are pursuing an endeavor like that, it makes you focus way more than you ever would if you were a casual fisherman. If you think about it, it's Saturday, let's go fishing, I have the day off. Well, Saturday may be a terrible day for fishing. The real day to go fishing might have been Tuesday afternoon. And to know the tides and the winds and the seasons and to know the way the water looks and to have that intimate connection to nature, you won't get it if you're just watching it. You'll only get it if your mind is set on a task that has a reward at the end of it. We're kind of hardwired that way. And and try it sometime. Try going on a hike with no point other than to go see something pretty. Maybe go walk to a lake and back, and now do that same walk and look for berries or look for mushrooms or whatever. You will find yourself so much more connected to that same spot that it'll blow your mind.
Again, from the introduction, you say that doing that kind of interactive walk in the environment can be a spiritual experience. You haven't used that word yet in our conversation, but I'm assuming you find it to be such?
Yeah, I'm not a real religious guy. I'm not a super spiritual guy, but the more time you spend out there, the more you realize there's something going on. I mean, there's something that we don't fully understand. And I've been made to feel small any number of times. I've been out fishing in the middle of the Atlantic in 10,000 feet of water, and you realize that you're just a mote in the middle of this huge sea. I've been in the middle of pine forest where the silence is so deafening it rings your ears. I don't know if you've ever been in silence that is so complete that your ears ring. It's this weird phenomenon that you get in deep forests. You get it in especially in snow. And it's this crazy feeling. You realize, wow, But for that, I could be gone. I've been wandering in the woods, looking for rabbits or whatever. And you get that hair feel in the back of your neck. Something's watching you. And I turned around, and there was a mountain lion, 150 yards from me, up in a tree, just staring at me. Like, hey, how's it going? And then like, how's it going? And I mean, but there's something out there that's bigger than us. And you absolutely feel it the more you spend out there.
You also call it a small act of freedom, and that brings me around to your grocery bill. You do buy some staples at the grocery store, yeah? What do you lay in from a store?
Well, beer. You gotta have beer.
You don't brew your own? Come on.
I don't. I actually make my own wine, but I don't brew my own beer. I mean, I know everybody says that. Like, I'll get to it. Beer, grains, dairy. That's about it.
So what's your average grocery bill for a week or a month?
A week, maybe $25.
Oh.
Yeah.
And you eat very well.
I think I do.
I want to talk a little bit. You mentioned your blog, and I wanted to talk about that. It's called Hunter, Angler, Gardener, Cook. It's very well reputed. You've been nominated twice for a James Beard Award.
Yep.
And you were awarded Best Blog from the International Association of Culinary Professionals in 2010.
And 2011.
And 2011. Yeah. Thank you. I will add that to my notes. What I'm working around to is that you are taken very seriously by professional chefs.
That was kind of an interesting revelation because you never really know who your audience is when you're sort of typing out in the internet, right? You know, send it off into the universe and who's listening. But apparently professional chefs and professional cooks really dig the site, and it's super flattering because, I mean, I was a line cook, so I was a pro, but I was never a chef. I never ran a kitchen, and then chef means chief. And so, you know, whenever people are like, oh, you're a great chef, I'm like, no, I may be a great cook, but I'm not a chef, and I don't want to denigrate the real great chefs in this country by purporting to call myself that. That said, when I get to do dishes that I see really accomplished chefs say, that's really cool, it kind of gives me that little warm feeling inside. And it also makes me push, because one of the things that I really want to do with this whole endeavor is to push the boundaries of what wild food can do. You know, too often wild food is campfire cooking. It's very simple, and all that's great. I mean, I love a trout fried bacon fat as much as the next guy, but there's more to it, and the only way that you can make a truly unique dish in this day and age, where everything has been done under the sun, is to use these ingredients. And I get to do that on a daily basis, and the chefs kind of watch it, and then they do their own stuff, and that's what's made these book dinners so amazing, is because they get to play. And when a chef gets to play, usually good things happen.
One of the things that what you just said makes me think of is a line from one of your print interviews, I think, where you say that there's a difference, perhaps a subtle difference, but a difference nonetheless, between a cook who hunts and gathers and fishes, and a hunter or gatherer forager who cooks. Can you explain that difference?
It's sort of where your mind is when you're pursuing whatever it is that you're pursuing. I love the hunt and the active fishing and the active mushroom hunting and whatever as much as the next guy, and probably more. But at the end of the day, it's about the plate. And so I'd much rather shoot a big fat doe than a giant buck with huge antlers. And that's mostly because I can get that doe easier, and it's going to taste better. And so I'm always kind of thinking about the possibilities on the plate, whereas a hunter is not necessarily going to do that in the field. It's kind of a question of focus.
I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. One of the things as well that comes out of your materials is the principle of combining elements that you would find in the same environment. So you quote the maxim, "What went together in life will go together on the plate." Mm-hmm. Have you been doing that in all 30 of these dinners, trying to assemble ingredients that could all be found in the same outing?
I try. I mean, I consult with the chefs on those menus. So ultimately, the chefs, it's their menu. And some of them have done it, and some of them have not. But I do dishes like that. So whenever I'm foraging or fishing on this tour all around the country, I've been able to put together a dish that really speaks to that particular place. I was hunting partridges in Montana, and so I took elements of that part of Montana and put them all together on a plate. The things that we found when we were hunting the partridges. I made spätzle, which, that part of Montana is very, very German, so it made sense to do that. And so you sort of think about the human fabric and then the natural fabric of whatever region you are, and then you put that dish together, and it will work. I mean, the only thing that will make it fail is your lack of technical skill. And sometimes I fail, and sometimes I don't.
I've been struck by the fact that you teach people skills. This is for the informed. You need to know what you're looking for. You need to figure out what to do with it once you have it. There's a great YouTube video of you demonstrating how to clean a gizzard.
Oh, yeah.
You make artwork out of that gizzard. It's pretty impressive. But this is not something anybody can just do casually on a given Saturday. You really are teaching people how to go about this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to have those skills, but you can actually do it casually on a Saturday. But that first Saturday, you may be just watching YouTube videos, picking up your technique. I mean, it's just, I did all of this stuff in my spare time. I mean, I was a professional journalist for 18 years, and I worked 60, 70 hours a week. And, you know, I do it more now, but even then I would say, all right, well, what's around now? I should be fishing now, or it's duck hunting season, or the mushrooms are out, or the berries are out. So that's what I would do on the weekend. And, you know, I made all kinds of mistakes, you know, and I pretty much taught myself to duck hunt, and it was kind of a horror show to start. Like, I didn't know what I was doing, but you learn.
I loved the detail in the gizzard cleaning instructional video that you should clean it in a bowl of water because the stuff that comes out will gunk up your pipes.
Absolutely. Well, it's great. It's gravel.
Yeah, clearly. I'd like to show off your book and talk about it just a little bit because it's a really beautiful production. We'll see if we can actually get a shot of it here, and if not, that's okay. But if our cameras can pick it up, that's great. One of the lovely elements of it, and it's a beautiful book, is the photographs. I gather you did some, but many are also by Holly Heiser, your partner?
She's my girlfriend, yep.
Yeah. They're stunning photographs. She's a professional photographer?
Now she is.
There are berries. There are shots in the fields and in the woods. There's snow on foliage. It's a gorgeous piece.
Yeah, I mean, one of our only regrets was that we couldn't get all the photos in color. But they said that would have added $10 to the cost of the book, and it was more important for me to have an easy price point on the book than it was to have, you know, an extra $10 for color photos. So I think I made the right choice.
I think you did too. It's I think a remarkably modest price for kind of a high-end cookbook, which leads me to some of my favorite recipes in here. I can't wait to try some of these, although I'm not sure I am brave enough to do the braised squirrel aurora.
I use chicken.
It is true that you make the concession of saying that you can substitute, you know, the X common ingredient for Y.
I mean, for me, it's more important that you make the recipe than it is to necessarily have the squirrel or have the shark or have the, you know, the elk or whatever. Because the recipes are designed for wild game, but they've also been worked with the domestics as well. Because let's say you love the book, but you're not a hunter. And so you want to make the recipes in that section of the book with domestic meats. So that's why I did that.
Okay, so I can try the braised squirrel aurora with what did you say, with chicken?
With chicken, yeah.
Chicken, okay.
Or rabbit would be better, actually.
Okay. How about the section that you have on corned antelope?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, I mean, it's just like corned beef, right? Except it's, you know, there's no fat in it at all. And, I mean, it's an amazing thing to do with a venison roast or an elk roast. And you just slice it, and there's your sandwich meat for St. Pat's Day.
Okay, now how about the oyster toad?
Oyster toads. Everybody wants to know about the oyster toads.
I gather they have pretty ferocious jaws.
They do. There's this nasty, ugly little fish about like that big, and they've got this huge head, and they kind of look a little like a monkfish, and they crack oysters, and so they'll break your finger if you get your finger in there, but they've got this huge cheek meat, and they're just they're fun to catch. You don't want to eat them too often because they can tolerate really polluted water. So, you know, every now and again, it's not going to kill you. But, you know, I just wanted to include that as an instance of an unloved fish that, when properly cooked, becomes a really, really beautiful plate of food.
So would you do the same thing with the cheeks of the oyster toad as you would do, say, with cod cheeks?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Well, for those in our audience who are not meat eaters, and that will be a considerable portion here in Oregon, you have a recipe for elderberry wine.
Oh, yeah.
What other kind of wines do you make?
Well, I live in California, so I make grape wines as well. And so I've been making wines in various forms for 20 years. And I started with honey wines, and then I went to fruit wines, and then when I moved into a wine grape region, I started making grape wines. So, but it's what I've always brought to it is the notion that a wine from an elderberry or a wine from elderflower or dandelion wine or something like that does not have to be some, you know, aw shucks folksy wine, right? If you apply modern winemaking techniques, you know, even, you know, modern winemaking techniques for the home brewer, it works. And you just have to adjust with acid and tannin and sugar, and you can create an actual, you know, wonderful table wine that you can give to your finest wine snob friends, and they're like, oh, that's nice.
That's worth a try. I like that idea. How about the daylilies? You say that they can be hard on the digestion.
That's like a lot of wild food. I mean, you know, a lot of wild foods are one of those things where they're phenomenal, right? And 5 of us at the table are having this great time, and then, well, really 6 of us would, but then that 6th person, you know, maybe gets a little bit of gastric distress later. The reason for that is our systems are so used to a particular set of foods that some people react in different ways to different things. Mushrooms are like that a lot. There's a lot of edible mushrooms that can affect individuals in weird ways. And so that's why whenever you're encountering a brand new wild food, especially plants, try a little bit first.
Okay. In an interview you did on TV with CW6 in San Diego, you used a great line. You said, "I like to zig where other people zag." We've just got a couple minutes left. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, I mean, if you can do what everybody else is doing, and you can do it well, and be, you know, in a larger sea, or you can find out what people are not actually doing and get good at that, and be a little bit more of a big fish in a small pond. And I've always kind of done that in whatever I've done, and because it's always been important to me to do uncharted stuff, and to do stuff that nobody else has done before. And even if it's something esoteric, which it often is, it's still a lot of fun to be, hey, I'm the guy who did that one thing, and as opposed to I'm one of many people who are baking bread, for example.
I see what you mean. Okay. Any regrets about giving up political reporting for doing this?
One.
I didn't think so after listening to you for a few minutes now. And last question. You're going home for a couple of months, finally, at the end of this tour. What are the first couple of meals you want to make?
Spaghetti and meatballs. I'm originally from New Jersey, and for me, pasta and red sauce is where I go when I'm tired and I just want comfort food. And I can make a pasta sauce, you know, in a coma. I made it thousands of times, and it's one of those things that just makes me feel happy.
And what kind of meatballs?
Well, you know, that could be duck meatballs. It could be wild boar meatballs, you know.
All right. Well, maybe you'll report back once you're home and have had that meal. Thanks a lot, Hank. It's been great to talk to you.
Thanks a lot for having me.
We've been speaking with Hank Shaw, a wild foods expert and the author of Hunt, Gather, Cook, Finding the Forgotten Feast. Shaw presented Hunter, Gatherer, Conservationist, The Challenge and Promise of Wild Food on November 14th, 2011 as a guest of the UO's Clark Honors College. The event was co-sponsored by the Oregon Humanities Center. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.